Chapter 1. What is the universe? The universe is everything. It's everything around you, the stars in the sky, the air you breathe, the ground you stand on. It's everything that ever existed, exists now, and will exist in the future. Think about it. The universe is huge, bigger than anything you can imagine. It's so big that it's hard to even picture. But at the same time, it's also made up of the tiniest things, atoms, particles, and energy that we can't even see with our eyes. But how did all of this begin? Well, the universe didn't always look like this. It didn't always have stars, planets, or galaxies. There was a time when it was nothing like what we see today. In fact, everything started out as a single point, smaller than a pinhead, and that tiny point was so dense, so packed with energy, that it held everything that would eventually become the universe. So if you could travel back in time 13.8 billion years, you wouldn't see stars or planets or even the space we know. You would see a tiny, hot, dense speck of nothing. But then, everything changed in an instant. Chapter 2. The Big Bang. 13.8 billion years ago, something incredible happened. This tiny dense point suddenly began to expand, faster than anything ever could. This is what we call the Big Bang. Now, the Big Bang wasn't an explosion like a bomb going off. It wasn't an explosion in space. It was the expansion of space itself. Imagine blowing up a balloon. As you blow air into the balloon, the surface stretches and gets bigger. That's what happened to the universe. Space itself stretched and grew, and everything started to spread out. In the first moments after the Big Bang, the universe was incredibly hot. So hot that particles couldn't form into atoms. It was like a massive sea of energy, with tiny, tiny bits of matter moving around. But as the universe kept expanding, it started to cool down. When it cooled enough, particles like protons and neutrons started to form. These are the building blocks of everything in the universe, and soon these particles came together to form the first atoms, mostly hydrogen and helium. For a long time, the universe was still mostly dark. No stars, no galaxies, just a huge empty space filled with tiny particles floating around. But as time went on, things started to change. The first light finally broke through. After a few 100,000 years, the universe had cooled enough that the light could travel freely. This was the first time the universe was lit up, and it was like a giant light bulb switching on in the dark. Chapter 3. The Birth of Stars and Galaxies. Now that the universe was lit up, something amazing started to happen. Tiny particles of hydrogen and helium began clumping together, pulled by an invisible force called gravity. As more and more of these particles came together, they got heavier and heavier. The pressure at the center of these clumps became so intense that it created something new: stars. Stars are like giant furnaces in space. Inside them, the hydrogen and helium get so hot that they fuse together, creating heavier elements like carbon and oxygen. These are the building blocks for everything we know: our bodies, our planet, even the air we breathe. Stars didn't form alone. They gathered in groups, held together by gravity. These groups became galaxies, giant collections of stars swirling together like cosmic whirlpools. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is just one of these galaxies, and it contains billions of stars. But there are billions of other galaxies out there too, each one with its own stars, planets, and mysteries. The universe was no longer dark and empty. It was filled with light, stars, and galaxies, a cosmic masterpiece coming to life. Chapter 4. The solar system takes shape. About 4.6 billion years ago, in one small corner of the Milky Way, a new story began. A massive cloud of gas and dust started to collapse under its own weight, forming a bright, new star, our sun. Around the sun, bits of leftover gas and dust swirled together, colliding and sticking. Over time, these pieces grew bigger and bigger, eventually forming planets, moons, and asteroids. One of these planets was special. It was the third planet from the sun, Earth. Earth was in the perfect spot, not too hot, not too cold. This just right zone made it possible for something extraordinary to happen. But Earth wasn't the only planet. Our solar system has 8 planets, each unique in its own way. There's Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars, the rocky planets close to the sun. Then there are the gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn, and the icy giants, Uranus and Neptune, farther away. All of this, the sun, the planets, the moons, and everything else in our solar system came from that same cloud of gas and dust. It's like a cosmic family, all connected to the same beginning. As the sun burned brightly at the center, Earth was getting ready for its own incredible chapter, the beginning of life. Chapter 5. The beginning of life. About 3.8 billion years ago, something incredible happened on Earth. Tiny, simple life forms began to appear in the oceans. These were the first living things, tiny cells that were so small you'd need a microscope to see them. At first, life was very simple. These single-celled organisms floated in the water, feeding on chemicals and sunlight. But over millions of years, they began to change and grow. They became more complex, forming different shapes and doing new things. Some of these tiny organisms began to work together, forming the first multi-celled life. This was a big step forward. Now, life could grow bigger and adapt to new environments. As the Earth changed, its climate, its oceans, its land, so did life. Plants began to grow, covering the land in green. Animals evolved to swim in the seas, crawl on the ground, and eventually fly in the sky. Life didn't just stay in one place. It spread everywhere, into the deepest oceans, the highest mountains, and even the driest deserts. Every living thing today, from humans to trees to ants, can trace its roots back to those first tiny cells in the water. Chapter 6. The universe keeps expanding. While life was evolving on Earth, the universe wasn't standing still. It was still expanding. Galaxies were moving farther and farther apart, carried by the invisible stretching of space itself. This expansion wasn't slowing down, it was speeding up. Something mysterious, something we can't see, is driving this expansion. Scientists call it dark energy, but no one knows exactly what it is. As the universe grows, galaxies move farther apart, like dots on the surface of an inflating balloon. One day, some galaxies will be so far away that their light will never reach us again. They'll disappear from view, even with the most powerful telescopes. But expansion doesn't just mean galaxies moving apart, it also means new stars are forming. Even now, in some parts of the universe, clouds of gas and dust are collapsing to create new stars and planets. The universe is always changing. It started small, grew bigger, and keeps growing. But what does the future hold? That's where the story gets even more interesting. Chapter 7. The fate of the universe. What happens next? The universe is expanding, but will it expand forever? Scientists have a few ideas about how the story might end. One possibility is the Big Freeze. If the universe keeps expanding, galaxies will move so far apart that stars will stop forming. Over time, existing stars will burn out, leaving only darkness. The universe would become cold and empty, a frozen wasteland. Another idea is the Big Crunch. Maybe the universe will stop expanding and start shrinking instead. Galaxies, stars, and everything else would collapse back together, returning to the tiny, dense point where it all began. Then there's the Big Rip. What if the universe's expansion keeps speeding up? Eventually, even atoms could be torn apart. The universe would dissolve into nothingness. No one knows for sure. The universe might surprise us with something we can't even imagine. Whatever happens, it's clear that the story of the universe is far from over. Chapter 8. Humanity's place in the universe. Now, let's zoom in. Way in. The universe is so vast, but here we are, on one small planet, orbiting one small star in one galaxy out of billions. Yet, we're special. Humans are the only species we know of that can look up at the stars and wonder, where did it all come from? We've sent probes to other planets, telescopes to study galaxies, and even walked on the moon. We're made of the same atoms that were created in stars billions of years ago. Every breath you take, every thought you have, is connected to the universe's story. Our time in the universe is brief, but what we do with it matters. Whether we explore other planets, unlock the mysteries of dark energy, or simply appreciate the beauty of the stars, we're a part of something much bigger than ourselves. The universe gave us life, and now it's up to us to decide what we do with it. Conclusion. The universe is vast, mysterious, and constantly changing. It began as a tiny, dense point and grew into something so immense we can barely comprehend it. And yet, here we are, tiny creatures on a small planet, trying to understand it all. In the grand story of the universe, we are just a small chapter. But even a small chapter can be meaningful. The atoms in your body were forged in stars. The air you breathe has traveled across billions of years. The universe gave us everything, and it asks for nothing in return. All we can do is look up, wonder, and marvel at the fact that we are a part of this incredible story.